Today we're going to be talking about why do I keep attracting narcissists, which I think is just such a huge question that a lot of women end up asking themselves when they keep finding no success in relationships. A narcissist often is someone who has this grandiose sense of self-worth. So they think they're really great. They think they're fantastic. They think that there's nothing they can do wrong, that they're really amazing. And they believe they should be promoted. They don't understand why their boss isn't recognizing them for how great they are. And they really just do have that real big sense of self-belief. When you couple that with a lack of empathy, which often narcissists can also have this lack of empathy and not being able to relate to, say, their partner or just others, not being able to put themselves in other people's shoes, this can often mean that there are a lot of conflicts in their relationships because they can't relate to other people, but they also think that they're doing such a great job. There's this lack of being able to self-reflect on their own flaws or what they can work on within themselves to be able to be better people. And often when this gets touched on by, say, a partner or someone else, when someone's asking for them to maybe step up their game in their relationship, maybe give them a bit more love and compassion, this person's going to get on the back foot really quickly and get really defensive and just slip into that attacking defensive mode really easily because they don't like to look at their own flaws or what they can do differently because it's too triggering for them. They have such a self-insecurity deep down behind that facade that they're going to attack that person back until they stop questioning why they're doing things and asking them to change. They kind of think they're right all the time as well in conflict, in arguments. Without that empathy, they think that there's nothing wrong and my behavior is okay and I've done nothing in this situation that might have upset other people when really they may have. So a really good example of this, if you can't really conceptualize it, is obviously with the media at the moment, is Donald Trump. So he's someone who doesn't like to be told what he could work on. He's someone who poo-poos other people as soon as they say things about him, and he thinks he's really fantastic. And I think in a relationship dynamic, this can be a bit of a challenge. I know for me personally, I kept attracting these kind of men to me, and I kept finding that people who they were really full of themselves, really confident and not really empathetic to what I was going through, really just imposing their own needs and beliefs onto me. And this was not the kind of guy I wanted to attract. I wanted to attract someone who was compassionate towards me and really caring about me in the relationship. And I just found when I kept putting myself out into the dating game, that's not what I would come across. And I really got to the point where I had to ask myself why. Why did I keep attracting these relationships, and why might you keep attracting these kind of people into your world? I've got two key points here that I want to focus on. So the first one being when we have been through something significant in childhood or growing up around someone with this kind of personality type, like maybe you were bullied or maybe you had your first relationship was really unhealthy and was with a narcissist potentially. And you might be someone who is that more caring, compassionate, wanting to help, wanting to give everything to everyone else person. This creates a wound within us. So we have that inner wound of being kind of manipulated and used for our kindness and our giving parts of ourselves. And this stays with us, even though we might think we've moved on from that relationship or we've been through that situation and now maybe it's been 10 years since you went through that really trying time. These things do stick with us, and often we find that when we do come through something traumatic, we tend to block it out. We tend to avoid it and pretend it never happened because it's just too hard to manage in that moment and to process in that moment. And often it takes a few years before we can really allow ourselves to feel comfortable enough to actually feel the emotions that went along with that. So a lot of the time when we're attracting these narcissistic types of people to us, they're going to challenge us. They're going to be able to press those buttons, which is going to push that wound again. And that's really going to bring all that stuff up for us again, especially if it's never been processed and it's just sitting below the surface. So I often think the universe has a really weird way of doing things where it will send people to us who are going to press those buttons and push up those wounds because something needs to be cleared within us. Something we've held on to for too long that's holding us back from being the best version of ourselves needs to be processed, and therefore this is why we're attracting this kind of person into our life, because this is our chance to be able to release it and let go of it and move forward ultimately into better relationships where this doesn't affect us anymore. So I know for me personally, I went through something at a young age. I won't go into the details, but essentially it was with a narcissistic partner, and I didn't know how to handle that when I was young. It was just something that happened and I just buried it, essentially. That's where it was at. And then I got to my early 20s, I'm going to say, maybe 22, 23, and I really wanted that amazing partner that I'd heard so much about, that loving relationship. And I guess I went out looking for it. I went on dating sites. I went to friends' birthdays and tried to meet their friends and, you know, all the standard stuff you do when you're trying to look for a partner. And I found in the course of about 2 months, I had about 6 people. Obviously, I can't necessarily label them all as narcissists, but they were showing some traits which I did not appreciate. I had men kind of coming up and thinking they owned my body because they'd kissed me and then suddenly I was all theirs. I had people saying really disrespectful things to me when I just met them, and I was horrified by what they'd said. I didn't even know how to respond because it was just like, I cannot believe you just said that. And this happened, about 5 or 6 times over the course of 2 months. And I remember sitting there going, what is going on in this situation? Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep attracting these people back into my life when this is the complete polar opposite of what I'm looking for? I'm looking for someone who's a healthy relationship dynamic, who will care about me and will be a really toing and froing, compassionate, loving relationship. That's what I'm looking for. Not someone who will come in and kind of dominate my needs with their own. And with what I knew about law of attraction, and that sometimes we attract things to ourselves for life lessons and things like that, I realized that this is what it was. I needed to clear this wound. I had this wound and it was going to hold me back from finding that love and that relationship I was really looking for. So that's point number 1 as to why you might be attracting these people into your life when it's not something you're really looking for. And I would encourage you to seek help. If you do know that there's something there that maybe wasn't really ever processed, find a coach, find a therapist, and sit down and work on yourself, because that's going to be the way to heal that wound in a way that we're not going to have to attract someone into our lives to push those buttons and bring it all up for us. If we can take that intentional approach, you're going to be more in control of the situation and you're going to be able to process it. And then I guess the second part I wanted to talk to you guys about today is that narcissists have a type of person they look for. So they go for the kind of woman who is that really, really nice person who wants to help everyone and look after everyone and make sure that everyone is happy, because they're going to get pandered to in that relationship. Any need they need met is going to get met by this person who really wants to help and heal. And as healers, as women, we're often told that we need to be in service, and this is a part of who we become. And there's nothing wrong with that until it becomes to the point where someone starts to take advantage of that or start pushing the boundaries with that. Narcissists will do that. They will push us to breaking point, essentially, because no matter how much you give, it will never be enough in these situations. And that's where the universe comes back in and goes, it's time to learn that lesson on boundaries and standing up for yourself. And where's the point where you've given too much and we need to pull back now? And so narcissists will go for people specifically like that because they know they can get their needs met. They know they can express shitty behavior and find a way to gaslight it or blame the other person, even though it was actually them who did it the whole time. And someone who's really caring and really nurturing will be able to be played on for their emotions. So the narcissist knows that if they do something horrible, like cheat on someone, if they say that, oh, it's because I've got my own stuff going on and it was because I was treated horribly when I was a child, someone who wants to help and fix that situation and heal them is more likely to give them another chance, give them another shot. And so that behavior will continue. Whereas someone who has a strong sense of their boundaries and goes, no, this is not okay, I'm not going to let this happen again, and really stand up for themselves, is going to let that person go, and that relationship's going to end. So the narcissist obviously wants their relationships to last as long as possible. So they're going to look for people who they can kind of manipulate a little bit easier. They're going to look for people who hate conflict, for example, because arguments can be scary. I 100% appreciate that, but I think they're so necessary to be able to clear things in relationships. And when we have a fear of conflict and we avoid it at all costs, this often means we also put ourselves and our own needs absolutely last, because that's the easiest way to avoid conflict, is to never express when something is going wrong for you or when you're not happy with something. And again, this is something a narcissist will look for in a relationship partner. They will look for someone who maybe has low self-esteem or has a lot of insecurities, because they know that they can play on that when the narcissist gets called out for some shitty behavior, and they jump back into that defensive mode where they're attacking and they're really getting in there. They're going to use those insecurities to their advantage, and they're going to be able to say, well, like, whatever horrible thing it is, this has happened, and like, don't forget about that in our relationship. Look how much I'm putting up with. So this is why you need to stay with me, because no one else is going to put up with that. I hate that classic line of no one else will ever love you for this except me, because that just puts that seed of doubt in our minds. We already have that insecurity and we hear that, and it hurts us, and it keeps us stuck in those shitty relationships. People who struggle to say no and put in those boundaries and say, hey, I'm not really okay with that, yeah, you asked me to pay most of the rent because you don't have a job at the moment, but I don't really think that's fair. People who can say those kind of things are going to just, the narcissists around them are just going to drop off, because they know they can't use that line to get their rent paid for. They know it's not going to work on this person because they've said no in this situation. So I guess that's what we want to foster in ourselves. If you are someone who hates conflict, that's not a bad thing. I don't mean to shame you for that in any sense of the word. I just want you to know that that is a thing that might get you into trouble, and therefore let's work on it now. Let's work on it together to self-develop and grow to the point where you can have a conversation and you can hold your boundaries and be in your strength. Because when we hold our boundaries and when we say no, we see people's true colors. So this narcissist is great at portraying that they're this amazing person, but when we set those boundaries and we say no, they're going to show us their true colors in that situation. They're going to get angry. They're going to get annoyed. And this is going to tell you the people around you who are the people worth keeping in your life and the people around you who aren't, because they don't respect what you need and want out of a relationship. This is why we attract horrible people to our lives sometimes, is because it helps us grow. Ultimately, it helps us grow into the better version of ourselves, where we can attract that healthy, happy relationship dynamic. And in that relationship dynamic, even the healthiest relationship, you're still going to need your boundaries. You're still going to need to say no at times. You're still going to need to have conflict and be able to talk it through to be able to get to a point where you can resolve things. And these are all the skill set that is what the universe is trying to teach us when we do continue attracting these kind of people. So I want you to know you're not alone in this situation. The amount of women I've worked with, and myself included, who have had to go through this process in order to get to that point where we can really attract those amazing relationships into our lives. You're on the journey. And I guess this is the first step, is acknowledging it and then starting to work on ourselves, work on being the best version of ourselves, so that we don't have to go through these experiences over and over again. The pattern doesn't have to continue. Let's break the cycle. Break the cycle in yourself. You get to have an amazing relationship, and then your daughters get to learn what boundaries look like from their mother, and things just continue and grow. So I'm doing a boundaries workshop in December. So if anyone's really resonating with that and would really like to learn more, I'll put the link below where you can find that. I think it's really good to have a conversation and even just nut out exactly what your boundaries are, because often it's just a concept and it's not an actual thing we've ever sat down and written out. So the aim of my workshop is to really get us to a point where, like, give you the how do we write out a boundary, and let's do some practice ones. Let's write them all out so we're completely aware of where we're at, so we can go forward and we can utilize these in future, so that we don't have to deal with shitty relationships anymore. That's what I want for you guys.